The bell above the glass door gave its little winter-chimed jingle, and I looked up from the display I was fussing with, an explosion of red lace and satin hearts we'd built for Valentine's week. It was February 12th, 1998, and the mall felt like a snow globe you could walk through, wet footprints tracked in from the parking lot, coats steaming faintly under fluorescent lights, teenagers drifting past in packs, the smell of cinnamon pretzels and department store perfume braided together in the air. He stepped inside like someone crossing a line he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross. Not young, not old, late 20s, maybe early 30s, tall but a little folded in on himself, shoulders rounded forward as if he could make his frame smaller by sheer will. His hair was neatly cut, dark and practical, and his jacket looked expensive in a quiet way. The kind of wool that doesn't pill, the kind of zipper that doesn't catch. He kept his hands in his pockets until he didn't, until he realized he needed them to do something with. That's what caught me first, the way his hands didn't know where to go. I'd worked lingerie and intimates retail long enough to recognize the particular choreography of discomfort. Some customers came in like they were shopping for groceries. Some came in laughing, overconfident, holding up a bra like it was a joke they were telling their buddies. Some came in with a mission and a sweating upper lip, determined to get in and get out before anyone could look too closely. This man had the sweating upper lip, but he also had a gentleness that didn't match the panic. He wasn't performing bravado. He wasn't looking for an audience. He was just trying. "Hi there," I said, stepping out from behind the counter with what I hoped was the most normal voice in the world. "Welcome in." He nodded without meeting my eyes. His gaze skated over the displays, red and pink, lace and bows, the kind of merchandise that turns a department store into a stage set this time of year. He drifted toward the wall of panties, like someone approaching a cliff edge. I kept my distance. That was another thing you learn in this job. Being helpful isn't the same as hovering. You let people breathe. You let them decide whether they want company. He reached for a package, put it back. Reached for another, held it up, stared at the size chart like it was written in a code he was afraid he'd fail. His throat bobbed when he swallowed. I wandered to a table nearby and pretended to refold a stack of half slips we'd already folded that morning, mostly so I could keep an eye on him without making him feel like a specimen. The store was quiet for a minute, and in that quiet, I could hear the soft crinkle of plastic packaging in his hands and his breath, shallow and quick. He picked a pair of red panties, classic Valentine's red, the kind of color that seems to announce itself before you even see it. He held them as if they might burn him. Then he took a second pair, black, more practical, more secretive, the kind of lingerie people buy for themselves rather than for a holiday. He stood there with both, red and black, like he couldn't decide which version of the story he wanted to tell, and then he moved toward the hosiery. Pantyhose were stacked in tidy columns, each package showing a glossy photograph of a woman's legs and a chart on the back that required you to know your height and weight. People underestimated those charts. They thought pantyhose were one size fits all until the waistband cut into their stomach or the toe seam sat wrong. I watched him pull a package out, flip it over, and go very still, like the numbers had suddenly betrayed him. He looked around. There was no one else in the store besides me and a teenage girl at the far end, sniffing body spray. The man's fingers tightened on the pantyhose package. Then, fast, too fast, he slipped the pantyhose under his coat and toward his pocket with the kind of swift, practiced motion that wasn't about stealing. It was about hiding. My chest tightened in a way that surprised me, not with judgment, but with a kind of tenderness that made me angry at the world on his behalf. A person doesn't move like that unless they've been trained to believe they should be ashamed. I could have pretended I didn't see. That would have been easy. But easy isn't always kind. Sometimes kindness is seeing and staying gentle anyway. I let my hands stop moving on the half slips. I walked over slowly, smiling like I was greeting any customer with a question about fabric softener or gift boxes. I gave him the dignity of my calm. "Finding everything okay?" I asked. He flinched a little, like my voice had touched a bruise. His cheeks went pink immediately. He nodded again, still not meeting my eyes. And then Boldness rose up in me like a bubble that popped before I could overthink it. Maybe it was the season. Maybe it was the fact that I'd watched so many men come in and lie clumsily, thinking they were alone in their story. Maybe it was because I could see he wasn't dangerous. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't trying to make a joke out of anyone. He was just scared. I tilted my head, let my smile widen, and said lightly, "Are those really for her, or are they for you?" His whole face went red. Not a blush, an eruption. His eyes dropped straight to the carpet. His shoulders drew in as if he expected a slap. In that split second, I could practically hear the old voices in his head. "Don't. Stop. Not you. Not here." And I knew I had clocked him. I knew the pantyhose were for him. I knew the panties were for him too, or at least they were complicated, and the complication was the point. I watched him hover at the edge of panic, and I moved quickly, decisively, so he wouldn't fall. I lifted a finger like I'd just remembered something important, my voice bright and conspiratorial. "Because I want to make sure you get the right size." His head snapped up. His eyes met mine for the first time. They were a deep brown, warm when they weren't terrified, and I saw the exact moment the shame loosened by half a degree. He let out a breath he'd been holding too long. "Right," he said, a little hoarse. "Size." "Exactly," I said, like we were talking about the weather. "Pantyhose sizing is... honestly, it's trickier than people think. Do you know your height?" He blinked. 6'1". "And about what weight range?" I asked, keeping my tone steady, not clinical, not prying, just practical. He hesitated, then said quietly, 180. "Perfect," I said, and turned the pantyhose package over in my hands as if it were the most normal thing I'd held all day. I pointed at the chart. "So if you're here, see this column, you'll want this size. If you go down a size, it'll feel too tight in the rise, and you'll be fighting it all day. If you go up, the knees will bag." A tiny laugh escaped him, surprised and relieved. I didn't even think about the knees. "Everyone forgets the knees," I said, grinning. "The knees always tell the truth." Something in him softened. His shoulders lowered a fraction. His hands stopped trembling. I asked, "Is this for a full outfit, or just hosiery?" He swallowed again, but this time the swallow felt like he was choosing honesty instead of being forced into it. I want a full outfit," he said, then quieter. Not from a store." I nodded once. No drama. "Okay, we can do that." He looked at the red panties in his basket, then the black. "These," he said, as if he needed to anchor himself to something tangible. I thought, maybe red because it's Valentine's, and then black because, I don't know. "Because black makes you feel like you own the room," I said, and watched his mouth twitch at the corners. I took a gentle step closer, lowering my voice. "If you want, we can make a little plan. We'll start with basics. Something that fits, something that feels good, then we'll build." He stared at me like he was trying to decide whether I was real. You don't think it's weird?" I didn't even have to think. "I think you're in a store that sells clothes. And you're buying clothes?" I said. "That's the whole plot." The teenager at the far end sprayed something that smelled like synthetic strawberries and wandered out again, leaving us alone with the humming lights and the soft music drifting from the mall speakers. He let out another breath, deeper this time. "Okay," he said. "Plan." "My name's Lois," I offered, extending my hand like we were in an office instead of a lingerie shop with heart garlands in the windows. He took it carefully. His palm was warm. "Drew," he said. "Nice to meet you, Drew," I said, and meant it with a force that surprised me. "All right, let's start with the pantyhose. Do you want sheer, opaque, something with control top?" His eyebrows lifted. "Control top?" "Help smooth things out," I said, and watched him flinch at the implication and then relax when I added quickly, "Lots of people like it. It can feel supportive, like a hug you can wear." That landed. His face went softer around the eyes. "A hug you can wear," he repeated, like he was testing the idea on his tongue. I guided him along the wall, different brands, different sheens. I kept it matter of fact, but I also kept it kind. When he asked a question, I answered like it mattered. When he didn't know the words, I offered them without making him feel stupid. We picked out 2 pairs of pantyhose in the size that matched his chart. one nude, one black. Then I brought him to the shapewear section because if he wanted a full outfit, I wanted him to feel held together in a way that made him feel brave. He hovered near the packages like he might bolt. I held up a light smoothing brief. "This is comfortable," I said. "This is not the kind that makes you feel like you're trapped in a sausage casing, unless you want that." He barked a laugh, an actual laugh, and I felt my heart do something embarrassing inside my chest. "Comfortable," he said, nodding. "Comfortable is good." We chose a piece of shapewear in his size and a half slip in a soft pale color that would prevent cling under a skirt. He kept touching the fabric with his thumb like he was memorizing it. Then came the fun part. "Do you have a dress in mind?" I asked, leading him toward the racks. His eyes widened a little, as if the word dress was a door he'd only ever looked at from the outside. "I don't know what would suit me," he admitted. "Okay," I said. "Then we're going to treat this like a first date. We're going to try a few styles, and we're going to see what makes you feel like yourself." He stared at me. "Like myself," he echoed. "Yeah," I said, and I didn't let the tremor of my own excitement show. "Not like a costume, not like you're borrowing someone else's skin, like you." I started with a simple black dress, nothing flashy, a soft knit, forgiving shape. Then a skirt with a gentle swing, the kind that moved when you moved. I added a top that could go with the skirt if the dress felt like too much. I held each item up, imagining proportions, thinking about how fabric falls, how seams sit. Drew watched, fascinated and frightened. He kept looking toward the fitting rooms and then away, like the door might bite him. "You don't have to try anything on today," I said quietly, noticing. "You can just buy what you want and go." His fingers tightened on the basket handle. "No," he said. It came out sharper than he intended, and he softened immediately. "I mean, no, I want to. I'm just scared," I offered. He nodded, swallowing. "Scared." I didn't try to talk him out of it. I didn't try to pep talk him into courage. I just made the fear less lonely. "There's a fitting room in the back," I said. "It locks. It's private. And if you want, I can bring you different sizes so you don't have to walk out here holding anything. You can just knock, and I'll leave it on the little hook." His eyes flicked to mine. "You'd do that?" "That's literally my job," I said, and then I smiled a little more. "And also, yes." Something in his face shifted, like he'd been waiting years to hear a simple yes. He nodded once. "Okay." I set him up with a room and handed him the first items through the gap in the curtain, keeping my gaze deliberately on the hanger instead of his body, giving him privacy even in the exchange. He disappeared inside, the curtain swishing closed, the lock clicking. For a moment, I stood there in the little corridor of fitting rooms and listened to the small sounds, fabric rustling, a shaky exhale, the soft thump of shoes being slipped off. My throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't anger. It was something like awe, because I'd seen this before. I'd seen men come in with the same nervousness, the same fast hands, the same rehearsed lines. "It's for my wife. It's for my girlfriend. It's a gag gift. She asked for it. She's my size, I swear." Over the years, you learn which lies are shields and which are knives. Most of these men weren't trying to hurt anyone. They were trying to protect the tenderest part of themselves from a world that treats tenderness like a weakness. And I didn't just understand it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. That part of me had taken longer to admit. I'd been raised in a house where feelings were treated like spills you cleaned up quickly. My father, World War II Marine, the kind of man who could silence a room just by entering it. He never hit us, never even raised his voice much, but he wore his emotion like a sealed jar. Everything inside, nothing out. I grew up translating quiet into meaning, guessing at moods, trying to earn warmth by being perfect. And then I became a woman who fell for emotionally unavailable men like it was a calling. I dated the charming ones who never asked me a question back, the stoic ones who treated vulnerability like a foreign language, the ones who made me work for crumbs of affection because that felt familiar, because my nervous system recognized it as home. It wasn't until my late 20s, after one too many heartbreaks that felt like banging my knuckles against a locked door, that I finally saw the pattern and got furious at myself in the best possible way. I remember sitting on my cheap apartment couch, legs tucked under me, and thinking, I am not doing this anymore. I am not building my life around people who can't meet me. So I made a rule, an explicit, almost comically simple rule. I will only date emotionally intelligent men. At the time, I didn't even know if those men existed, but I decided I'd rather be alone than keep reenacting my childhood. And then, in a lingerie store 2 days before Valentine's Day, I stood outside a fitting room door and listened to a man learn how to let himself have something. The curtain swished. Drew peeked out, face flushed again, but this time with something other than panic. He didn't step fully out, just enough for me to see the hem of the skirt, the way it hung. His hands hovered at his sides, unsure what to do with themselves. How is it? He asked, voice quiet. I looked at the fit, not just the size, but the way his posture changed when he wore it. His shoulders had lifted, like he'd remembered he was allowed to occupy space. His eyes were brighter. It's good, I said honestly. But I think we can do better. The waistband might be a touch tight. Let me grab the next size up. He nodded, disappearing again like a shy animal retreating into its burrow. I brought different options. A dress that draped instead of clung, a pair of panties with softer seams, another half slip. I kept my voice easy. I kept my words normal. I made sure every question I asked had an escape hatch, every choice his to make. Somewhere in the middle of it, he laughed again, quietly, at himself. I can't believe I'm doing this, he murmured through the curtain, and I heard the smile in his voice. Believe it, I said. You're doing great. There was a pause, and then, even quieter, thank you. It was just 2 words, but it landed like something holy. By the time he was done, he came out fully dressed in his own clothes again, but he carried himself differently. The basket was fuller now. Panties, pantyhose, a dress, a skirt, more hosiery, a half slip, shapewear, a little wardrobe of permission. At the register, I rang everything up and folded each item with care, not because the store required it, but because it felt like part of the ritual, treating his choices like they deserved respect. He watched my hands, then looked up and held my gaze. Lois, he said, testing my name like he was making sure he remembered it. Yeah? He hesitated, then said, You must see this a lot. I could have lied. I could have made it smaller to make him feel less exposed. Instead, I chose the truth that would set him free. I do, I said, more than you'd think. You're not alone. His eyes went glossy for a second, and he blinked hard, trying to keep himself together. It would have been easy to look away. I didn't. He swallowed. I always thought it was just me. Nope, I said softly. Not just you. He nodded like he was storing that fact somewhere safe inside himself. I handed him the bag, and my fingers brushed his for a moment. The contact was brief, ordinary, but it sparked anyway, something warm and electric. Before I could stop myself, I heard my own voice say, lightly, I'd love to see how you look with all of your new clothes. It came out casual, almost teasing, like a compliment you'd give someone about a haircut. But underneath it was a genuine curiosity and something else, an invitation. Drew froze. For one terrifying half-second, I wondered if I'd crossed a line, if I'd taken his newfound safety and turned it into pressure. The fear rose in my throat. Then his face softened, and he did something that made my heart stutter. He smiled, not a nervous smile, a real one, a smile that reached his eyes. He cleared his throat. Would you want to have dinner? It was so earnest, it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. I kept my face calm because I wasn't going to startle him with my own sudden happiness. Yeah, I said, I'd like that. He blinked, like he hadn't expected the world to say yes back. Tonight? I get off at 7, I said. I'll wait, he said quickly, then seemed to realize how intense that sounded. He flushed again. I mean, if that's okay. It's okay, I said. And then I added, because I wanted him to know what kind of woman I was. But you don't have to wait in the mall like a sad movie montage. Go home, breathe, I'll meet you. He let out a shaky laugh. Okay, right, I can do that. He paused, then said, Do you want me to be like... He gestured vaguely, cheeks red. I understood what he was asking without forcing him to say it. Do you want me to show up as the person you just met in the fitting room? My pulse tapped against my ribs. I chose my words carefully, like placing something fragile on a shelf. I want you to show up in whatever way makes you feel safe, I said. And if you ever want to share more, I'm not scared of it. Drew's eyes held mine, and something profound settled between us. An agreement, quiet but solid. Consent, pace, trust. Okay, he whispered. When he left, the bell jingled again, and the cold air rushed in behind him. The store felt warmer for the fact that he'd been there. All afternoon, I moved through my tasks like I was underwater. I helped other customers, women buying lacy bras with giggles, men buying roses and panic, and all the while I kept seeing Drew's face when he realized he didn't have to lie. When 7 o'clock finally came, I pulled on my coat and walked out into the mall's fluorescent evening. He was there near the fountain, hands in his pockets again, but his shoulders weren't folded this time. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. We went to a little Italian place off the highway, red checkered tablecloths and candlelight that made everyone look a little softer. Over pasta and cheap wine, Drew told me pieces of his life in careful sentences. He didn't spill everything at once. He didn't dramatize. He just spoke. When he didn't know how to say something, he admitted it instead of hiding behind a joke. I've wanted to do that for years, he said at one point, eyes on his water glass. Buy things, try them, not feel like I'm doing something wrong. You're not doing something wrong, I said. He looked up. I know that in my head, he said. I'm trying to know it in my bones. That sentence, trying to know it in my bones, hit me like a bell. Emotional intelligence isn't flashy. It's not always eloquent. Sometimes it's just the willingness to tell the truth about what you're feeling and to keep learning how to hold it. We talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs. When he drove me home, he walked me to my door, and he didn't try to force anything. He didn't lean in like he was owed a kiss for being decent. He just stood with his hands at his sides, looking at me like I mattered. I had a really good time, he said. Me too, I said. He nodded, then hesitated. Can I see you again? Yes, I said, and my voice didn't shake. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into sunlight after a long time in a dim room. Drew didn't hide from himself with me. He didn't dump everything on me either. He owned his story. He asked me questions about mine. He listened to the answers. When I talked about my father, about the way love had felt like guessing games in my childhood, Drew didn't try to fix it with platitudes. He just stayed present, eyes steady, hand warm around mine. And yes, eventually, he let me see him in the clothes. Not like a performance, like a private unfolding. A skirt that swayed when he walked through my living room. Pantyhose that made him stand taller because he liked how his legs looked. A simple dress that made his face soften with relief, like his mirror finally spoke a language he understood. Sometimes he looked at me as if waiting for ridicule. Every time I gave him the same thing. Steady warmth, clear consent, a smile that said, I'm here. Over time, the shame loosened its grip. Not all at once, not magically, but it loosened. And I watched him become more himself, and I fell for him harder every day. We married in the year 2000. Small ceremony, close friends, spring air that smelled like wet grass and possibility. There are photos of us laughing, his tie slightly crooked, my hair pinned up with a few rebellious curls falling loose. When I look at those photos now, I don't just see love. I see the decision I made on my apartment couch. To stop chasing locked doors, to choose emotionally intelligent men, to understand myself well enough to change my life. And I see that moment in the store, the flash of red, the quick pocketing of pantyhose, the big smile I offered him like a bridge. Are those really for her, or are they for you? Because I want to make sure you get the right size. Sometimes I think about how close we came to never meeting, how easily I could have stayed silent, how easily he could have bolted. I think about all the people walking around carrying secret selves like heavy bags, afraid of being seen. I thank my lucky stars every day that I recognized what was happening with me, my old hunger for emotional unavailability, and made a change. That I chose a different kind of love, that I chose a man brave enough to be tender. And if there's one thing I wish I could hand to anyone listening, it's this. Learn your own patterns. Learn what you reach for when you're scared. Learn what you think love is supposed to feel like, and ask yourself who taught you that. Because when you understand yourself, you can choose differently. You can choose better. You can walk into a store, or a relationship, or a life, and stop hiding your hands in your pockets. You can let someone help you find the right size. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll find someone on the other side of the counter who smiles at you like you're not a secret, like you're not a mistake, like you're simply a person buying clothes, stepping toward yourself 2 days before Valentine's Day in the ordinary miracle of a Thursday afternoon.